So we're here today to talk about how to prepare a vineyard for using the Klima cane pruner. So what we're going to do is talk to you about some of the details and some of the things you need to keep in mind when you're making the preparations for using the Klima technology in your pruning program. The first thing that we need to understand is that the machine can't pick up the wires too close to the strainer post. So we've got some simple rules that apply to a vineyard. In most cases, 8 metres from the strainer post is a good distance out from the strainer post to pick up the wires. Typically in these spacings that's between 5 or 6 fines out from the end post. What we typically do is actually manually cut and strip the first 8 metres of every row. The idea behind doing that is to make it very easy for the operator of the machine to locate the correct wires to pick up. So we're talking about the fruiting wires and also the lifting wires on the same side of the post as the fruiting wires. Once we've got everything manually stripped out, cut and stripped out from the first 8 metres, then we need to get into some detail about how to prepare the canes in this first 8 metre section to minimise any potential damage to those precious canes. Two key things. One is that we need to try and avoid, if we can, when the machine picks up the fruiting wires and the foliage wires, being these wires here, we want to try and avoid the pinching, what we call the pinching effect. So as the machine comes in, it's going to pick up these wires here, collect them all up, and as it does that, it's going to pinch these canes together like that, just on this, what we call the pickup point. As you get that action, you can get potential for canes to be scissored off, what we call scissored off, or further damage to the buds on this section here. The first way is to actually untangle these shoots from the wires and position them on the other side of the wire. This again makes it easier for the driver to pick them up, and it also reduces the chance of damage to these canes in what we call the pickup point. One way in which to make this process a little bit easier, it's a really good idea to actually trim these canes before you position them on the other side of the wire. It makes it a lot easier if you don't have tendrils and laterals in the way when you're doing this process. Remembering these canes will have to be trimmed up before they're trimmed and wrapped anyway, so you're not duplicating any passes here. So again, we get these canes carefully onto the other side. We actually push them right over on that side. So again, when these wires come up and get pinched together, we're not pinching these precious canes in between these wires here. So you can see this cane here is intertangled between these wires. A good way to check whether this is going to create a problem is to actually pinch the wires together, and you can see that cane's firmly going to be stuck in between these two wires. So what we're going to do is trim it up and then position it on this side of the wires so that it's going to be completely out of the way during the pickup process to avoid any unnecessary damage to this cane. The other reason we do this is because as the wires get lifted up, they get lifted up to about this height, and then as they drop back down again, you really don't want them getting caught. You really don't want these precious canes getting caught by a wire when it comes back down, which can result in cane getting snapped off at the socket of the vine. So just trimming off some old bunches and some laterals and tendrils. Now they're trimmed up, I'm going to position them on the correct side of the wire. Those two are already in the right position. This one comes under. Okay. Now you can see these are our fruiting wires and these are our lifting wires on this side. As they come up and they pinch together, we're not going to trap any of these canes. So you can see that if you go like that, you can see they're well and truly on the right side of all of these wires, protected from any potential damage. So the next step of the process is to detach the foliage wires and the fruiting wires from the post. So it's pretty straightforward. Just popping these out of their positions so they sit there freely, and also the fruiting wires need to be detached from their positions, and then we're ready to go. So I'll move on to the next post. Another tip for when you're using the Klima machine in your vineyard, if you have a big tall canopy that stretches well above the top wire, we strongly recommend that you come through with a summer trimmer or a barrel pruner or something of that nature and trim as close as you're comfortable with to the top wire. The key reason for that is if you have very long replacement canes that you're leaving behind, the wires are displaced away from the rows like this and then they drop back down to the vineyard floor. If you have big long canes arching into the middle of the row, the wires can then drop back down on top of them and snap them out of the socket of the vine. So you don't want big tall canopies, you want them to be trimmed nice and neat, just like this vineyard. The next step in the process is to make your cane selection choices and also to separate the waste material from the precious canes that you want to leave behind. The easiest way to describe this is basically making the minimal number of cuts that you need to make to detach the waste material from what you want to leave behind. So in this particular case, this vine's already been cut and they've made a pretty good job of it. You can see here they've made one cut right here. They've made a spur cut in here. Okay. Then they've made another cut up in here, one there, and another one there. So they've detached the waste material and they've also selected the canes that they want to leave behind. You notice that they haven't left an excessive number of canes for replacement. You don't need to leave any more than you would typically leave for traditional pruning. So again, minimal number of cuts that you need to make to separate the waste material, being this bit here, from the precious wood that you want to leave behind, being these canes. This particular vine here, you can see they've made one cut through here to remove that waste material, retained this cane, cut off that old cordon, made another cut in here and another one in here. So 4 cuts and this vine's ready to go. Here's another example of a vine that's been pruned, ready for the Klima machine to come through and strip the unwanted canes away. So in this case here, I've made one cut there, another one here, and another one here. So 3 cuts, this vine's done. So just to reiterate, first and last 8 metres of every row to be stripped out manually. Then we trim and position the canes on the correct side of the wire on those first 8 metres. Then we detach the foliage wires and the fruiting wires from every post along the row and we make our head cuts. So we're now ready for the Klima machine to come in and mechanically strip these rows. One really important thing to remember when a Klima machine is working in a vineyard where you're working, you must stay at least 100 metres away. It's a dangerous piece of equipment, just like a vineyard trimmer or a vineyard mower or a vineyard mulcher. There needs to be a good safety margin around the machine. We recommend a 100-metre exclusion zone for people. So the Klima machine is a very effective, but it's also a very dangerous machine. If you're inside 100 metres when it's working, you need to either stop the machine or get out of the vineyard.